everybody. Lady Steam here. Welcome to the Kinetic Cutter Club. We're up to Project 5 in our boxes. And in this box, what we're going to do in this project, we're going to make a tissue box holder. It seemed like it was very appropriate to the time, so we decided we'd go ahead and share this with you. It is a cute little square tissue box holder. It's got an interesting hinged lid on it, as well as a base that's been moved up from the bottom of the box. What does that mean to us? Well, as we look at the videos, it's going to give us a chance to do several things. We will be able to look at and discuss projects with multiple pages, because we know some of you have lasers that are smaller beds. We've actually created 2 pages in our corral and given you 2 pieces of the project. Second, in this case, I'm going to walk through taking a box design that's a standard box and moving the bottom up so it's partway up the box itself, and we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. Finally, we'll talk about how this hinged lid works. It's not one we designed, but it will give you a chance to see some of the things you can do with editing boxes. And finally, we used captive screws in the last project, but this will give you a chance to see a little bit more about how captive screws are set up and how captive screws work. So one more piece in that part of the puzzle. So join me, won't you, in walking through what our drawings look like and what are included in this project that we've sent you, and get you started and ready to cut. Now that you've got your overview of what we're doing, let's take a look at the documents available for you this time in our folder. What you'll notice first is that there are many more files than there usually are. And there's a really good reason for that. This is a 2-page document. So if I hop over to the Corel inch-size document that we've used before, you'll notice that I have a page 1 and a page 2. Corel supports multiple pages, so I'm easily able to do that, go back and forth between them. But some of the other file formats don't. So first you'll want to notice that we've got, as usual, your Corel drawings both in inch and in millimeter format. We also have DXF files as usual, but at this point we have 4 of them. So we have them in inch, page 1 and page 2, and millimeter, page 1 and page 2. Same thing is true for SVGs, page 1 and page 2, both in inch and in millimeters. And finally, 2 pages of the PDF for you. So that's the first thing to kind of know about, is that we've got duplicate pages of them. The reason we did that is because many times your laser beds are small, and if your bed is 12 by 20 or 12 by 24, we wanted to make sure that the drawing was small enough it would fit okay on your bed. So we've given it to you in 2 pages. If you've got a big laser, you'll be able to fold them back together. But in this case, we are going to give them to you in 2 pages and let you do things with them from there. So having said that, I want to talk a little bit about what the files are that we've given you, and what the parts of the box itself are. So here's what your parts are. We started with, on page 1, a left and a right side. You'll notice that you have hinge connectors on those. That's how you tell it's the left and the right side. On the front, you can tell because there's an out jut right here. And that's the front piece, and it's going to map up to the left and right fronts on there. If we go to page 2 of the drawing, you'll see that we've got a back, and in this case, I've pulled the line in and pulled out this bump out and this bump out that you saw on the front. That's so that the back sides of our pieces back here can support the flat pieces needed for the hinge. I also have a bottom and a top, and on our top I have hinge parts as well. So that's the first thing to talk about. The second thing I want to talk about here is I want to show you a couple of things we've done to make this box a little more interesting. Now, the first one of those is I took my box bottom and I just used the box designer software that we talked about the last time we did this. at boxdesigner.connection lab. And I built a box design that was this full size of basically 4.8 by 7. Well, actually, it was 4.8 by 6, I think. And I moved this bottom line up to support this internal support for the bottom and to build pretty little bases for it to make the box a little bit more interesting. So I want to talk a little bit about how I did that. Um, First, again, boxdesigner.connection lab is what I did. In this sample, I'm just going to show you what I can do, how I can do that on a 2x2x2 box, but you could certainly do that on any size box you might want to move this bottom layer up on. So let's go back over into Corel, and I've imported my 2x2x2 box here. Now, when you do this, what you'll notice first is that this doesn't line up and go into that slot. So what we need to do is a little bit of rotation. I'm using the transform tool to rotate the side 90 degrees at a time. And if I rotate it by 90 degrees, then I have it fitting perfectly here. And I can also notice that I've got no jut out. So I'm going to call that an in, and I'm going to call this an out. So if I rotate this so the in is on that side, that should work okay. And I'm going to rotate this so the in is on this side facing down. So now I've got an in here and an out there and an in here and an out there. And then the four sides will fit together. So that's perfect. The other thing I can notice, though, is if I rotate this one more time, all four of these sides happen to be the same. That's not always going to be the case, but I am lucky in this example. So what I'm going to do is get rid of all of these, and we're going to make the edges happen, the changes happen just on one of them. So I'm going to go up to this one, and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. And then you'll notice that I've got this wonderful square. Now, depending on what box tool you use, these may all be separate segments. And if they are, you can just ungroup all and do this move separately. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this line into two sections using the break apart tool. And then under object, I have a piece here that says break curve apart. And if I do that, what you'll notice is that this is now one curve and these are a totally separate piece. So I'm going to raise them up by 1/2 inch. I'm going to extend this line so it goes all the way across. And I'm going to draw one more line here. Now, again, I want these all to stay hairline, so I need to go back to properties and make sure that new line I drew was hairline. And then Corel has a really cool tool that's a virtual segment delete. There are a couple of different ways to do this, but I'm just going to use the virtual segment delete tool and delete that side. So now what I have on this project is a flat bottom around the outside edge, but these will all slide into the holes perfectly. That's the first thing I did when I set this up. The other thing is I've decided I want my box to have a flat top, and since I didn't check that on the checkbox in the designer tool, I'm just going to come back up here to the top and drag those sides up so everything is nice and flat. So now what I have, if I group this all together, is a great side with a flat top. Means I don't need the box top anymore. I can use my transformation tool again, and I can go to this transform tool here. I'm going to move the position right by 2 inches, since that's how wide my box is, and I'm going to make 3 copies of it. And I now instantly have all 3 copies of my box. And I have my box bottom that's up a little bit in the box, and I could save this at this point and cut it. So really easy to move and arrange box parts as you need to. The other thing to be aware of with our tissue box, speaking of things you can do to edit your box, is if you end up with wood that's wider or narrower than the eighth of an inch that I'm using, you're going to use some of those same techniques. And you could take one of these pieces, I'm ungrouping it, and you could highlight. Let's get rid of that outer box so it doesn't get in my way anymore. You could highlight just those pieces and you could adjust the size of them. So maybe you have wood that's thinner, maybe you have wood that's a 1/4 inch instead. You can just adjust the size there. But in addition to adjusting that size, if you're adjusting your wood thickness, you're going to want to make sure that you adjust these pieces as well. So just like I moved them around earlier, you can bring a grid line over here and say, okay, I want to add another 1/4 inch sticking out. Or maybe you want to put a second outer layer on. Well, in that case, I'm going to move this left by an eighth of an inch. I can click on my box to turn them into editable things. And then I can highlight just this outer side of the pieces and I could drag them out to be on this new line if I wanted to. And I would definitely want to be more zoomed in to do that. But it's an easy way to manage adjusting the box itself and start to work on changing sides around. Do some of the other pieces you might want on it. Now, one more thing to talk about in this design specifically before we talk about the things you can change is the hinges. Now, this isn't our hinge design, but what you'll notice is I have this upper left corner here, which has a little inner circle, and then I've got an outer frame on it and a little bit of an outer shape that I can use to attach to my box. So you can just take these two sections from the sides and attach them to any box you want to if you want to convert a box into a hinged box. So I've got this side adjustment here. I also have a little section up here that's sticking out. So this width here between these two edges is actually the width of my box. But I've gone in a little bit here and I'm coming out with my hooks to attach it together. So how do we hook this together? Well, we take this little circle here, which is actually my hinge itself, and we're going to slide that over this bar. The hole in it is an eighth of an inch tall, and it's the same width as this. And it will fit inside the hole on the hinge part over here. So that'll go into the hinge part when you put the side on. Once those are attached together, then you can take the bigger circle and slide it over the outside of that and glue it down and attach the hinge on and lock the hinge in place. So that's what those 4 circles are that you're seeing in your drawing. And speaking of the 4 circles, let's talk about one more thing you're going to notice in this drawing that's a little different. On page 1, you'll notice we've got red and green and blue, and red is etching as we've used before, green is our cutout, and blue is our outer edge. But in this one, I want to gives me a chance to talk about cutting from the inside out. I'm sure your wood is all perfectly flat always. But if for some reason it's not, and it probably won't be, we recommend cutting using your tools from the inside out so something doesn't drop down or pop out at the wrong moment and cause pieces to not be able to be cuttable or your laser focus to be off. So in this case, what we've done is we've used an inner cuts color here for your 4 circles. We've used an inner cuts 2 layer here to cut this ring, you want to cut that second, and then we've gone to this outer edge to cut the outer edge. So that gives you a way to do that. Now, you may, if you're really having trouble, you could set those 4 inner spaces to a totally different size and actually make them one size different from that, or one color different from that, and cut the inner circles first and then the outer circles and then your hole in your tissue box. So lots of choices of things you can do. Another thing to be aware of is that it gives me a chance to remind you about how we're doing our captive screws. We've done that before, but here's our captive screws on this box. You'll notice if you want to grab hold of one, we've got to zoom in a lot, but you've got this lovely shape here as a sample already. That'll work with 440 3/8" hardware. If you need to make it taller, you could extend that out a little bit, or make it wider if you're using a screw different than a 440. And these hole sizes here are all perfect for 440 hardware as well. So just keep that in mind if you need to adjust to a different hardware size. But that's captive screws. And remember, I said that it works pretty well for these to be 0.1 inches away from the center of the edge of the place where we've put it. So if I go back to my Untitled 2, and this is small enough it wouldn't need captive screws, but I could go ahead and I could put a piece here centered on that bar, and then I could draw a circle here, not like that, that would be wrong. Draw a circle here. Man, it's being stubborn today. Fine. And make it 0.112 by 0.112. Drag it over to my edge and move it left 0.1 to get it where I want it to be on my box. Again, if I was going to do that, I would make sure I went to properties, change it to hairline, and then change my color to green to make sure it matched. And I could again go duplicate that same set of changes. That's the other thing to be aware of, though, is we want to remember how to do captive screws if you like using them. Now, finally on this, I want to point out that as with all your drawings, we're not trying to tell you here what this has to look like. We've given you a great sample to start from, but there are all kinds of things you can do. You can change the words. You can get rid of the drawings completely. If you want this just to be a pretty box to store stuff in instead, you could get rid of the hole in the top. If you wanted it to be shorter, you could adjust the height down. All kinds of choices about designing it. The other thing you could do if you wanted to was you could take one of our geared projects from an earlier box project or from an earlier Kinetic Cutter Club project and take the gear spacing and the gears from it and move it to one of the sides of your box. That's a pretty easy change to make. Make sure you don't change the screw spacing, and certainly make sure if you rescale it, you rescale both the screws and the gears at once so everything scales up or down the same amount. That's the most important thing about if you're adjusting sizing, to make sure you adjust the screw spacing and the gears at the same time so everything goes the right way. Once you've done that, You're ready to delete the box size information. You're ready to move your pieces to where they need to be to cut on your laser, whether that's upper left or bottom left or upper right for that matter. Move ahead and move them around. If you've got a big laser, you can copy things from the second page onto the first page of your project. Save it in the format you need to for your laser, or send it directly to your laser or to your CNC to go print it or to go cut it. And once you've got that, then you're in great shape. And once you're happy with the cutting, come back to the video and we'll walk through what we need to do to actually be able to record, to build the project. This is the build video for the COVID tissue box holder that you can see here. We're actually going to do a combined build today for both the box of making and for the Kinetic Cutter Club Project 6. Since we decided that we were going to do this COVID tissue holder and we wanted to get it out, we're combining the two things together. So, whether you received your tissue box in your box of making or you cut your own with the Kinetic Cutter Club, the building process is the same, so we're going to do that here. As always, we'll start with opening the bag. And most of these pieces are pretty big, so I think we can actually do this first part, just like looking at them spread out this way. You should have received, as always, a hardware bag. In this case, it's going to have 12 3/8" screws and 12 nuts on it, and you can put it aside. You're also going to see, or have cut, 4 little pieces. These are 2 small and 2 big donuts, is what we've called them. And the big donuts are on the outside here. So if you're trying to decide how you're going to decorate your box, you're definitely going to see your big donuts on the outside edge. So you can open that up and decorate them. And then we're going to end up with 6 pieces for your box itself. Now this project is pretty simple to put together, but it's going to be fun to decorate on. So this is your decorate project for the box. One side of it says, stay safe and stay well. The other side says, don't forget to wash your hands. So in this case, you need to know what the front is that goes between the two of them. That's going to be the one of the COVID virus itself that has the stick out part on this side. And you'll notice if I put it here, it interlocks perfectly with the 2 front faces on my box. And that's how you'll know that this is the piece that's the front and that you want to decorate as the front. That makes the one with the innies on the top the back. And again, it'll interlock here as we turn the corner. Finally, you're going to end up with a bottom. That's going to go in these holes here with the Steamy Tech down, which means if your box is open, somebody will be able to see both sides of it. And a lid with a nice hole. So, what do you need to do to these pieces to get them ready to go? Sand, 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 as always. It's not super important in terms of building, but it definitely will make them feel better on your hands as you do it. And then decorate away. All sides of all pieces are visible depending on if your box is open or closed and if you have tissues in it or not. So make sure you do something to the insides if you want to finish them up and make them look good to go and ready to build. And once you've spent great amounts of time thinking about how you're going to decorate your box and you've got all of the pieces prepared, then come back to the video and we'll walk through how to actually do the assembly. It's pretty straightforward. Now that you've got your parts all decorated, I'm so excited about that. We're going to actually start looking at how to assemble them. So I haven't opened those 4 little donuts yet, so I'm going to do that. I'm also going to open my screws here. And you should, if you count them, find 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 3/8-inch screws and 12 nuts. As always, if we've done something wrong, you can always grab a spare from the spare screw kit. So I'm going to start with my front piece. I'm going to take my bottom, and it doesn't really matter what orientation you're using here, but my bottom is going to go in like this. So you may want to put some glue on it. You might want to wait and screw it together first, and then add just a bead of glue across around the inside, whatever is easiest for you. But I'm going to go ahead and put a dot of glue on the front to put it into here thusly. Always wanted to use the word thusly in a sentence. And as with always when we're using captive screws, I'm just going to drop my screw into this hole on the inside. Actually, let's do it from this side. Put my hand underneath. Drop my nut into that hole. I'm going to take a screw, and I'm using this paper towel as a place to hold my screws and the glue, and I'm just going to take that and drop it in and use the screwdriver to tighten these together. Get it nice and secure. And now I have my front on my box. So now I'm ready to put the sides on. The stay well piece is going to go on this side so that the ear is at the back. If I were to put it on this side and put the ear at the front, things would be very confused and it wouldn't fit right. So we're going to do it on this side. So, as the last time, I'm going to put couple of drops of glue on the teeth here sticking out. I'm also going to put a little bit of glue in between those two and just a little bit of glue on these teeth to put them together. And then I'm going to let gravity help me for a minute here. I just set it down here to hold it together. And since I've glued it in, I can let it dry, all held together, I hope. I'm going to drop my nut in here on the top. Put a dot of glue on the end of the screw. Trying to avoid getting glue all over my fingers, which I have managed to not do. I'll take that screw, put it in. Now, to make it easier to put your tissue boxes in or out, I'm pushing this out just a little ways from the slot. As I screw it in, or trying to give myself a little more room. You should have plenty of room, but you're going to make it a little easier. Lean it out just a little bit. And I'm going to put the nut in the bottom, or try to. You'll notice I've got my hand underneath to capture the nut so it doesn't fall out. Put my little dot of glue on it. The other way to glue these in is to slide the screw part way through and then put the glue on it before you tighten it into the nut. Or to use thread locker. We've talked about that in other videos, but thread locker works equally well. And I have one more to do on the fastening this side in, so I'll do that next. on first, because getting the last side in requires working with the lid as well. So I'm going to go next to do the final side, or the back, which is this other COVID graphic. So again, I'm going to put a little glue on the edges here. And a little glue between those spaces, and a little glue here to put this all together. If you have already built your mask, or your mask pen, then you already have opened up, and you may have access to the baking soda we've included, and you've learned how to use baking soda to dry super glue, so you can use that here instead. Now, the other methodology for getting these screws in is to make sure you're sitting so they're parallel, giving you two hands to actually use to tighten the screws down. I am not usually coordinated enough to actually get the screw to start that way. And it almost always slides out on me when I try to do that. Let's see if I'm lucky again. That one worked amazingly well, actually. So one more. See? They just won't stay. And if I can manage to not move the box at all, then I have two hands to use for my screws. But I'm not always coordinated enough to do that. Go ahead and do that like that. And I have one last screw to put in on this side. Wow, that went a long way that time. One last screw to put in on this side. And one more drop here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 done. And what fell was not a nut, it was a screw rolling off. So I only have 4 more of the 5 screws I need. But now we're ready to do the back part. So let's talk about how these hinges go together. What's going to happen is this. Let's see if I can get this at an angle you can see it. This is going to slide in this hole like this. And then this little donut is going to go on it. But it has to go on after you put it in the hole. So I'm going to wait and save the donut part for last. And I'm just going to slide this into the hole before I put this side on. So let's get our glue on this piece ready to go, and let's put the lid in, and then we'll put the final side on. Couple of drops and dribbles there. Before I slide this in, I need to set my lid on top. So I'm just going to set my lid here with that slid over out of my way. Set this down like so. And see if I am coordinated enough now to get this back lined up properly. Come on. You can do it. There we go. So now that's all set and ready to go. And you're going to put in 5 more screws to hold the whole thing together. And since I have dropped one into my shoe, I'm only going to do 4. But I would recommend starting with these top 2. That will mean the lid doesn't fall out and you're not fighting with losing your lid when we're ready to put the lid in place. So I've got that one on. I'm going to put this one in. I need to rotate it this way. Put that one in. Drop that into the hole and tighten it down. Back up over here. Put one more in here. You may have to open the top if you lose it inside, which I have done in the past. And remember, you have one more to put in on this surface. I don't have my screw right now, so I'm going to wait on that. And now I'm going to do my last step, which is to actually put the hinges on here. Now, ideally you get these 2 glued together so that nothing comes apart on you. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to slide this in just a little ways, not all the way in, is one option. The other option, and then glue to it. The other option is to just put a dot of glue on the top of your bar. The trick is to not get that circle to get glued to your hinge pieces, which we definitely don't want to do. That would be bad. So I'm going to put another nice size drop of glue this time on the bar and put this bigger one on it. And you'll notice that I've got a perfect hinge on this side. And I'm going to work it every few seconds for the next 30 seconds or so to make sure nothing got stuck where it didn't want to. Again, I'm going to put a little drop of glue on the bar and slide this over it, which will get us some glue on that piece. And that circle attached to the bar and not moving. And then I'm going to put a nice bit of glue here. So that when I slide this on, it pushes in a little bit. And again, I'm going to spend the next 30 seconds or so opening and closing my box to make sure that it doesn't glue together. And that's all I need to do. Just watch and wait patiently. And that's it. Drop your box of tissue in the top and you have a perfect little tissue box to tell people you are staying safe and well. Thanks.